T and Little T channel. I'm Tina, also known as Little T, and we are heading towards the end of February, and I just recently started watching some booktube videos on YouTube where people go over the books that they've read for either like the end of the year or just if they go and get a bunch of books, they call it their book haul, and what they're going to read next and what they've already read and what they like. And I've not ever done a video like this, but I realized that reading is a huge part of my life. I have a bullet journal here, and I record the books that I read. On these pages, I kind of make my own little bookshelves, if you can see there, and fill out the books on the bookshelves of ones I've read. And let's see, each shelf I make holds 10 books. So I think I read 86 books in 2022, and so far this year I've read, well, getting up to 15, I guess, this year. So I'm just going to go over the top 5 books that I read in January. I read 9 total, and when I say read, quotation marks, I mean that I either listened to it on an audiobook or I read it as a physical book, which is pretty rare for me. I read most of my books through my Kindle app on my phone or on my iPad. I use our public library's online system through the app called Libby, and I'll put a little image up there so you can see what Libby looks like if you're going to search for it in the App Store. And it's just super convenient because I don't actually have a Kindle. I, like I said, use it on my iPad or on my iPhone to read. So I won't be actually holding up physical books to show you. I've snapped a picture of the front of the cover of it through my phone, and I'll show you an image of what the book looks like as I'm talking about it. I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I'm quite an indecisive person. So for me to choose the top 5 out of 9 that I've read wasn't an easy thing to do. I kept kind of going through the rankings. I was very sure of my number 1 book. I wasn't so sure when we got down to like 4 and 5 because it was just a little harder for me to choose. This year I've started putting stars out to the side after I read each book, how I rank it, like 5 stars or 2.5. Luckily so far I haven't read any 1-star books. For me, what I've learned that time is very valuable, and if I've read a book up to like 40 or 50 pages and I'm really not getting into it, I DNF it. Did not finish it, and I just check it back in and I go for another book. There's so many books in the world, so many good books to enjoy. I'm not going to waste my time on a book that I don't like. And I actually learned to do this because I kind of had that finish mentality for the longest time, but I learned it from a podcast that I listened to called What Should I Read Next? It's just the greatest podcast if you like books. The host, Anne Bogle, lives here in Kentucky, and she interviews somebody on her show that has submitted an application. They talk about what their reading life is like, and they give her 3 books they like, 1 book they didn't, and what they're reading now. And then she comes back with recommendations for 3 books that she thinks they will enjoy reading next. So it's a really good way to find out books that you might like if you don't have a source for just like randomly choosing books. So I recommend that podcast, What Should I Read Next? I did print out some notes because I tend to kind of, when I talk, I kind of wander and I'll go down a path, so I'm going to try to stick to my notes. I did find a lot of these summaries on Goodreads, which some of you may be familiar with. So I'm going to get started with my number 1 book for January 2023, and that is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and it was published in 2022. It's 546 pages, but don't let that throw you. You'll get so involved in the story that it will just zoom by. This story, it's kind of funny because we moved to Kentucky this past summer, and this story is set in Virginia, which it's in the Appalachian Mountain area, and you may be familiar with a lot of the opioid crisis that's gone on in this part of the country, and that's part of this story. It is about a young boy, and when I first saw the title, demon copperhead, I thought, oh my gosh, does this have something to do with demons? I would not be interested in that at all, but I do love Barbara Kingsolver. I think I've read about 5 of her other books. But demon is just a nickname for the boy in the story. His name is Damon Fields, and his nickname is Demon Copperhead. He has bright red hair, and it is a common thing for people to get nicknames in this area. He doesn't start life off in very good circumstances. His mom's a teenager. They live in a single wide mobile home in a poorer area, and he's constantly searching for what he may have as family, because he didn't even know his dad. His dad was deceased before he was born, and you learn that really early on in the book. He has a sense of humor. He has a tenacity to survive even through all these circumstances that he goes through, and you just get caught up in his life and want to figure out what's going to become of him. Sometimes you just want to yell at him and say, don't make that choice, but of course it's part of the story. And it's actually an adaptation that she took from Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, which, sad to say, my reading of classics was not very much in my high school or college days, so I know of the story, but I've never read that story. Trigger warnings for this book would be drug use or overdose, teen pregnancy, domestic abuse, suicide ideation, so just beware of those, and I think that you would really enjoy this book. It was one of the top 10 books for the year. Book number 2 is called Musical Chairs. It's by Amy Poppel, and it was published in 2020, and it's 416 pages. I think what drew me into this book is that 2 of our daughters, well, our only 2 daughters, are involved as professional musicians, playing in quartets and other ensembles, and the main character in this book, Bridget, has been a part of a string trio for her entire career. She's dreaming of spending the summer in her kind of, it wouldn't be ramshackle because it is Connecticut, but it's kind of her rundown house in Connecticut for the summer with her boyfriend, fiance, but things don't go very well in that area. Her twin 20-something children decide to come in and kind of crash for the summer, and her dad lives in that same town. He's very famous in the music world. So it's just this wonderful story of friendships, family, lots of characters, but they're easy to keep up with as you read through this story and find out what does happen with her trio and what happens with her father and her kids. It's a very excellent book. That's number 2. Number 3 is called The Queen of Hearts by Kimmery Martin. It was published in 2018, and it's 348 pages. I like books that have to do with anything medical, whether they're true medical stories, like about coroners or emergency rooms, things like that. And this one is not true, but it's based on 2 women who became friends in medical school. One is a pediatric cardiologist, and the other is a trauma surgeon. The story goes back and forth between Zadie and Emma, and so you get both of their perspectives. They're both married now with children, and they practice in North Carolina, but not exactly in the same offices. And it's going to go back in time to when they're in medical school, so you get some of the previous story, and then someone from their past comes into the story and shakes things up a bit because there's a secret that has not been shared, and this was going to come out in the story. It read really fast for me. I enjoyed how it was written in that back and forth style to get different perspectives, and that's my number 3, The Queen of Hearts. Number 4, The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This was published in 2021, and it's 301 pages. In this story, it's set in London, and it's set in modern times and then back in the late 1700s, so late 18th century. And there's a lady who's a historian, and she had planned a trip to come over to London with her husband for their 10th anniversary. She's recently found out that he has cheated on her, and so she comes to London on her own. And while she's just kind of going through, she discovers this small apothecary bottle in the Thames River, and she wants to find more about this. What about this bottle? So since she's a historian and she knows how to do research, she befriends somebody in the library, and this starts her search to find out what truly went on in these unsolved apothecary murders back from the late 1700s. The other two characters that are main characters in the story are Nell and Eliza. Nell is an older woman who has worked in the apothecary business all her life with her mother, and Eliza is a 12-year-old, precocious, smart little girl who has been living with somebody else, boarding with them in this town, and she and Nell become entangled in this story that goes back and forth to the present times with Caroline, and then back to Nell and Eliza. It's pretty fast-paced, it's got some intrigue in it, and it's a little bit scary. The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. And number 5 is Me, My Hair and I, 27 Women, Untangle an Obsession by Elizabeth Benedict, published in 2015. It's 336 pages. This is a group of 27 essays because it's 27 women, and they're all talking about their hair, the history of their hair, the cultural relationship with their hair, stories of race, family, religion, culture, health, politics, and sexuality. It is so interesting, and all of us have a relationship with our hair. Usually if it's straight, we want it to be curly. If it's curly, we want it to be straight. Thick, thin, wiry, fine, all sorts of things. And we all know how good it feels when you get just the right haircut. So these stories are just, they whip right along, true stories about women talking about their hair as it relates to their lives, their families' lives, how they've been raised. I just thought it was very interesting, and any woman, I think, would want to read a story about hair. So that is Me, My Hair and I, 27 Women, Untangle an Obsession by Elizabeth Benedict. The other books that I read in January that didn't make the top 5 are The Dollhouse by Fiona Davis. I gave that 3 stars. Rush by Lisa Patton. I gave it 3.5 stars. The Art of Racing in the Rain, I listened to that on audiobook. I gave it 3 stars. And then After the Quake by Haruki Murakami. I gave it 2.5 stars, and I listened to that one also on audiobook. So there you have it, my very first book review for 2023. I hope to do another one on my top 10 for 2022, and that will probably come out sometime in late February or maybe early March. And I'm talking to the big B. Brian reads just as much as I do, or perhaps even more, and I'm going to see if he will talk to you about some of the books that have been his favorites too. So I'm still working on that. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this new video. If you have some comments or some book recommendations, please leave a comment below. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We have a video that comes out each Tuesday. Thanks again for watching. Have a great one.